In 1932, the Australian Army marched into the field with machine guns and thousands of rounds of ammunition. Their target was not a rival army. It was a flock of birds. By the time the guns fell silent, most people agreed the birds had won. This is the Great Emu War of Australia. The full story. Chapter 1. Soldiers Without Land. World War I left Australia with over 200,000 casualties and tens of thousands of dead. When the survivors came home, the government wanted to reward them. It offered veterans small plots of land in Western Australia to start wheat farms. The idea was called the Soldier Settlement Scheme. The scheme sounded generous. In practice, it was a trap. Many plots sat on poor, dry soil in a region called the wheat belt. Most of the new farmers had never grown a crop in their lives. Some still carried injuries from the trenches. They were being asked to build a living out of land that barely supported a crop at all. Then came the Great Depression. Wheat prices collapsed in 1929 and kept falling for years. The government had promised subsidies to help farmers survive the drop. Those payments mostly never arrived. By 1932, many families were losing their farms. Debt, drought, and a market that would not recover were taking everything they had left. Chapter 2. The Birds Arrive. Emus are the second largest bird on Earth. They stand up to 6 feet tall, and they can run at over 40 miles an hour. Each year, after breeding season, tens of thousands of them travel toward the coast. They are chasing water and food. In October 1932, that migration path ran straight through the wheat belt. An estimated 20,000 emus poured into the farms around the towns of Chandler and Welgolan. They ate the wheat straight out of the ground. Worse, they tore through fences built to keep rabbits out, and the rabbits poured in right behind them. One pest problem was opening the door to another. For farmers already buried in debt, this was the last straw. Some later said an emu could trample 100 plants for every one it ate. Just walking and running through a crop did the damage. The settlers had already survived years of drought and falling prices. Watching birds wreck a season's wheat in weeks pushed them past their limit. Chapter 3. A request for machine guns. Many of the settlers were veterans themselves. They knew exactly what a machine gun could do, because they had used one in the war. A group of them traveled to Perth. They asked the Federal Minister of Defense, Sir George Pearce, to send the army. Pearce agreed. He approved sending 2 Lewis machine guns and 10,000 rounds of ammunition to the wheat belt. Western Australia had to cover the cost. The mission was placed under Major G.P.W. Meredith of the Royal Australian Artillery. Sergeant S. McMurray and Gunner J. O'Halloran would operate the guns. It was an unusual mission for a peacetime army. Some in the government saw it as good publicity. It was a chance to show off military hardware and give reporters something to write about. To the farmers waiting in the wheat belt, it was simpler than that. They believed the army was finally coming to save their crops. Before we move on to the next chapter, if you're enjoying this, please like the video, follow so you don't miss future videos, and turn on notifications. Chapter 4. The First Battle. The operation began on November 2, 1932, near the town of Campion. Soldiers spotted around 50 emus, but the birds were too far away for an accurate shot. Local farmers tried to herd them closer, driving them toward the guns. It did not work. The emus split into small scattered groups, and small moving targets were much harder to hit than one large flock. 2 days later, the soldiers got a better chance. More than 1,000 emus were spotted heading toward a dam where Meredith had set up an ambush. He waited until the birds were close, then gave the order to fire. The gun jammed after killing only about a dozen birds. The rest of the flock scattered before the crew could clear the jam. Meredith even tried mounting a gun on the back of a truck, hoping to chase the birds down. That failed too. Emus could run faster than the truck could safely drive over rough farmland. The constant bouncing also made it almost impossible to aim. By November 8, the unit had fired around 2,500 rounds. Exactly how many emus died is disputed, but by every account it was a tiny fraction of the ammunition spent. Sir George Pearce, embarrassed by the results and the mockery in the press, pulled the troops out. Chapter 5. Round 2. The withdrawal did not end the problem. Emus kept destroying crops, and Western Australia's state government kept pushing for the army to go back. By mid-November, Meredith's unit returned to the field, this time with a smarter plan. Instead of chasing flocks across open ground, they staked out the water holes the birds needed to survive. The new approach worked better, though not dramatically. In the first 2 days back, the soldiers killed about 40 emus. Results stayed uneven through the following weeks. By early December, the unit was killing roughly 100 birds a week. Waiting near the water worked better than chasing the birds down. Meredith was recalled on December 10, and the operation ended for good. His final report claimed 986 confirmed kills, using 9,860 rounds of ammunition, almost exactly 10 bullets for every bird. He also claimed that another 2,500 wounded emus likely died later from their injuries. Historians have studied the record since. Most consider that second number a rough guess at best. It was probably a large exaggeration. Chapter 6. An enemy built for this war. Meredith later admitted the birds outsmarted his men. He wrote that each flock seemed to post its own lookout. It was a tall bird that stood watch. The others fed and ran the moment danger appeared. An emu at full speed can reach 45 miles an hour. After the first burst of gunfire, Meredith said, the target was moving fast. It stayed in view for only a few seconds. Their bodies made things worse for the gunners. Emus have thick hides and dense feathers. A bullet that only grazed one rarely brought it down. One farmer later found 5 old bullets still lodged inside a single bird from earlier culling attempts. It had kept living and running for years with them inside it. Meredith made a comment that followed him for years. He said a division with the endurance of these birds could face any army on Earth. Ornithologist Dominic Cerveny put it more bluntly. He wrote that the machine gunners had dreamed of firing into packed masses of birds. That dream fell apart fast. The emus scattered into small groups almost as if they were following orders of their own. Chapter 7. After the war. Farmers asked the government for military help again in 1934, in 1943, and in 1948. Every time, the answer was no. Instead, officials leaned on a bounty system that had existed since 1923. It paid ordinary farmers for every emu they killed on their own land. In just 6 months in 1934, farmers claimed 57,034 bounties. That was far more than the Army's machine guns had managed in over a month. Long stretches of new barrier fencing were built to keep emus out of farmland entirely. They worked far better than any gun. Culling continued quietly for decades using rifles and fences instead of Army units. Between 1945 and 1960 alone, an estimated 284,704 emus were killed in Western Australia. That number dwarfs anything the 1932 operation achieved. And no one ever called it a war. Emus survived all of it. Unlike species that vanished under the pressure of European settlement, they adapted and endured. In 1999, Australia listed the emu as a protected native species under national environment law. That is a striking turn for a bird the Army once tried to wipe out with machine guns. Today the Great Emu War is remembered less as a military record. It is remembered more as a joke that keeps getting funnier with time. Books, articles, and even film proposals still reference it. The Emu War gets remembered as a punchline, but it is really a story about the limits of brute force. An army with machine guns assumed firepower alone would solve a problem that was actually about coordination, terrain, and patience. It didn't. What finally worked was slower and less dramatic: fences, bounties, and years of steady effort. That gap between overwhelming force and a scattered, moving enemy still shows up today. You see it in pest control, in warfare, and anywhere people underestimate an opponent that refuses to stand still. That is the story of the Great Emu War. The Australian army marched out with machine guns. It came home having barely dented a flock of birds. Nearly a century later, it's still one of history's strangest reminders that not every war is won with more firepower. History always has one more secret. Follow the oddities of history, and witness the past up close.